Bloodlines and power rule the Lycanthrope kingdoms. That means only families with royal blood and great strength get to be kings and queens. But nature does not bow to any crown. Nature follows its own rules. No king can change that. She was dragged in chains to the Alpha King's bed. She was nothing but a vessel for his legacy. That means she was treated like a container, not a person. The king only wanted her to have his baby. But when the royal heir was born, the tiny baby did something amazing. He defied an entire empire. He chose the captive woman over the false queen. The stone walls of Castle Ironpeak were always wet. They sweated with the chill of the cold northern winds. For Rowena, the cold was a constant reminder that she was a prisoner. Once she had been a proud daughter of the Silverpine Pack. That pack was killed because they refused to kneel to the king. Now Rowena was nothing more than a prize taken from a war. She scrubbed the stone floors of the great hall until her fingers bled. She moved like a silent ghost in a castle that celebrated the death of her people. But Rowena had something far more valuable than a kingdom. She had a pure, unbroken shifter body. That means her wolf spirit was healthy and strong. The ruling king was Alpha King Cedric. He was a man carved from granite and duty. That means he was hard and cold like stone. His rule was absolute. No one could say no to him. His army was the strongest in the land. But the Ironpeak dynasty was falling apart from the inside. His chosen mate, Luna Vivienne, came from the rich house of Lancaster. But she could not have children. For 5 years the kingdom had waited for a baby to be the next king. Whispers of rebellion had started in the lower valleys. The people were getting angry. The pack elders were led by a cruel man named Elder Harlan. They demanded a solution. Bloodlines said that an alpha's firstborn baby must inherit the wolf's raw power. But Vivienne's rich but weak family line could not give the king a child. The solution came in the form of a decree. That is a royal order. It was signed in blood and sealed with a poisonous flower called wolfsbane. The king would take a surrogate. That means a woman who carries a baby for someone else. They did not want a willing noblewoman. A noblewoman might use the baby for power. They wanted a captive. A woman with no rights, no family, and no future. They chose Rowena. The night she was called to the king's chambers, the heavy oak doors shut behind her like a tomb closing forever. Cedric stood by the fireplace. The flickering flames made long, scary shadows on his scarred chest. He did not look at her with desire. He looked at her with sad acceptance. "This is not my choice, Silverpine," Cedric said. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. "But the crown needs an heir. Do this duty, and when the baby takes his first breath, you will have your freedom and a bag of gold." Rowena stood there shaking. Her rough servant's dress gave her no warmth. She felt the heavy, crushing weight of the Alpha's power. She knew that the promises of kings were written in water. That means they wash away easily. "And what about the child, Your Grace?" she asked. Her voice was surprisingly steady. "The baby belongs to the throne," Cedric said coldly. "He will be Vivienne's son. You are just the dirt where the seed is planted." The months that followed were a waking nightmare. Rowena was moved from the servant rooms to the safe but lonely North Tower. She was fed the richest meats and the strongest herbal drinks made by the royal doctor. Her body, once thin and tired, began to grow with the king's baby. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental torture caused by Luna Vivienne. The rich woman was eaten up by jealousy and feelings of not being good enough. She made it her mission to remind Rowena of her low place. Vivienne wore fancy gowns with thick padding around the stomach. She walked through the courtyards, pretending to be pregnant. But in the shadows of the tower, her cruelty had no mask. She would visit Rowena's room with her guards. "Don't think this makes you special, mongrel," Vivienne hissed one evening. Her long nails dug into Rowena's chin. "You are just an incubator. That means a machine for growing babies. You are a peasant beast doing a body job. When that pup is cut out of you, you will be thrown back into the mud where you belong, and he will never know your name." Rowena stayed silent. She had to survive. But as the baby grew inside her, so did a strong natural bond. In the deep night, when the castle was quiet, she could feel the tiny wolf spirit moving. It was reaching out to her own wolf. She would put her hands on her big belly and hum the old lullabies of the Silverpine Pack. She felt a fierce, scary love growing in her chest. It was a love she knew would soon be taken away. By the 8th month, carrying the Alpha's baby almost broke her. The baby was huge. His changing inside the womb caused Rowena terrible pain. Cedric visited only twice. He stood in the doorway, his golden eyes fixed on her stomach. He never looked at her face. He was a king, waiting for his weapon. He was blind to the woman making that weapon with her own blood and pain. The night Prince Arthur was born, a wild thunderstorm hit the peaks of the Ironpeak Mountains. Rowena's screams came from the North Tower, but the thunder swallowed them. Midwife Greta was a stern woman with hands like iron. She directed the painful process. Rowena fought through the fog of pain. Her wolf tried to take over to ease the pain, but the silver chains tying her to the bed kept her human. After 16 very long hours, a sharp, strong cry cut through the stone room. "A boy," Midwife Greta announced. She wrapped the wet, bloody baby in royal red silk. A strong, perfect alpha male. Rowena gasped for air. Her vision was blurry. Her arms reached out without thinking. "Please," she sobbed. The mother's pull was screaming in her veins. "Just let me see him. Let me hold him once." Before Greta could even turn, the door burst open. Luna Vivienne swept into the room with her guards. Without a word to the bleeding woman on the bed, Vivienne grabbed the wrapped baby from the midwife's arms. She held the baby awkwardly. A crazy, happy smile twisted her pretty face. "Tell the king," Vivienne commanded. She turned on her heel. "The Luna has given birth to his heir." Rowena screamed. She thrashed against her chains as the door slammed shut. The door took her heart with it. She was left alone in the cold, bloody sheets, shivering and empty. For the first 3 days, the kingdom celebrated. The bells of Castle Ironpeak rang without stopping. Barrels of beer were rolled into the village squares. Prince Arthur was shown from the high balcony. King Cedric held the tiny bundle in the air. The political unrest vanished right away. The Ironpeak dynasty was safe. But behind the heavy oak doors of the royal nursery, a quiet, scary crisis was happening. The baby prince would not stop crying. It was not a normal baby's wail. It was the sharp, sad cry of a desperate wolf pup. When the royal wet nurses tried to feed him, Arthur violently turned his head away. He refused to drink. His tiny claws came out and scratched their chests. Vivienne, desperate to keep up the lie that she was the mother, tried to hold him. She tried to calm him with her smell. The result was a disaster. The moment Arthur was pressed against Vivienne's chest, he screamed. His tiny body went stiff. To the simple instincts of a newborn wolf, Vivienne was a stranger. Worse, her smell was full of lies and false magic. He rejected her completely. By the 5th day, the king's joy had turned to fear. Arthur was losing weight fast. His golden eyes, once bright and awake, were now dull and sunken. His loud cries had become a weak, rough whisper. Maester Coburn stood over the golden crib. His hands were shaking. King Cedric paced the room like a caged animal. Vivienne sat in the corner, crying into her silk handkerchief. She blamed the wet nurses for having sour milk. "What is wrong with my son?" Cedric roared. He grabbed the doctor by his collar. "You said he was strong. You said he was perfect." "He is, sire," Coburn stammered. He was terrified. "His body is not sick, but his wolf, sire, the wolf bond." "Speak clearly, old man." "The baby's spirit is starving," Coburn explained. He stepped back carefully. "Wolf babies do not just feed on milk. They feed on the spiritual feeling and the smell of their mother. The bond made in the womb. He knows that Luna Vivienne is not his real mother. He is refusing all food because he thinks his true mother left him. If he does not get her smell and her milk by nightfall, the wolf inside him will die, and the boy will follow." Silence fell over the nursery. It was heavy and crushing. Vivienne stopped crying. Her face twisted in horror and anger. "No," she said, "I am his mother. You will not bring that dirty Silverpine captive near my son." Cedric turned to his mate. His eyes flashed with the dangerous light of the Alpha. "If my son dies, Vivienne, this kingdom will burn, and your house will burn first." Without another word, Cedric stormed out of the nursery. His heavy boots pounded down the stone halls. He went deep into the bottom of the castle. Rowena had not been given her promised freedom. Instead, to keep the secret safe, Elder Harlan had thrown her into the wet dungeons under the castle, to recover in the dark. When Cedric threw open the iron door of her cell, the smell of mold and dried blood hit him. Rowena lay curled on a bed of dirty straw. She was pale, hollow, and shaking with a fever. She looked like a ghost. Cedric knelt beside her. The great Alpha King lowered himself into the dirt. He gathered her weak body into his big arms. She did not fight him. She was too weak. Her eyes were half closed. "Rowena," Cedric whispered. His voice shook with a softness he had not shown in 10 years. "Rowena, I need you. He is dying. Arthur is dying." At the sound of the name, at the mention of her child, a spark of pure mother fire lit up in Rowena's dull eyes. The mother wolf, broken and chained, rushed to the surface. She grabbed the collar of the king's shirt with surprising strength. "Take me to him," she breathed. Cedric carried her up the winding stairs himself. He ignored the shocked gasps of his guards. He walked past the throne room. He kicked the nursery door open. Vivienne screamed in anger as Cedric laid the dirty, ragged prisoner on the soft velvet sofa in the middle of the room. Midwife Greta rushed forward. She placed the dying, silent baby into Rowena's shaking arms. The whole room held its breath. Rowena pulled the silk blankets back. She put the baby skin to skin. She buried her face in the soft hair on Arthur's head. She breathed in deeply. Then she let out a low, rumbling purr from deep in her chest. It was the ancient song of the Silverpine Pack. Right away the baby's tiny hands uncurled. The stiff tension left his small body. Arthur turned his head. His nose searched for the familiar smell of pine trees and rain. It was the smell that had comforted him in the dark. He latched onto her breast, and for the first time in 5 days, the royal baby drank. He drank greedily. A small, happy sigh escaped his lips. Cedric fell to his knees beside the sofa. He buried his face in his hands. A rough breath tore from his throat. He had his heir. But as Rowena looked up, she met the murderous, hateful gaze of Luna Vivienne across the room. Rowena pulled her child closer. The king might have thought he had secured his legacy, but the true battle for the Ironpeak throne had only just begun. The baby had made his choice. Nature had bowed to no crown. And Rowena, the captive vessel, realized she now held the leash to the most powerful alpha in the land. The morning after Prince Arthur's amazing recovery, everything changed. Rowena was not set back to the wet, rat-filled dungeons. By King Cedric's direct order, she was moved to the sunroom. It was a fancy set of rooms connected to the royal nursery by a private, arched hallway. To the outside world, the official story stayed the same. Luna Vivienne had a hard birth and hired a wet nurse of common blood. But inside the castle walls, the truth was a sore that would not heal. The rich house of Aster, Vivienne's true family, was quietly boiling with shame. Vivienne's father, Lord Reginald Aster, had poured millions into Cedric's wars to get his daughter on the throne. Now a surviving war prize from the dead Silverpine Pack held the king's only child hostage. She did it with nothing but her milk and a lullaby. Rowena adapted to her fancy cage with the quiet, smart grace of a survivor. She wore the fine silk dresses given to her, but she took off the heavy jeweled corsets. She liked the loose flow of the fabric. Her whole life revolved around Arthur. The baby prince grew strong under her care. His cheeks filled out. His golden eyes were bright and followed her every move. But it was King Cedric whose behavior changed the most. At first, his visits to the sunroom were short and only about the baby. He would stand near the door, his big body tense, watching Rowena feed or rock the child. He rarely spoke. But as weeks turned into a month, the king stayed longer. He began to sit in the velvet chair by the fire. He watched the quiet closeness between mother and son. For the first time in his harsh, war-filled life, Cedric was forced to look past his unfair ideas. He watched how Rowena's fingers, scarred from scrubbing his floors, touched Arthur's cheek with endless softness. He noticed the way the afternoon sun caught the silver strands in her dark hair. It was a mark of her lost pack. Most scary of all, Cedric's own wolf began to react to her presence. Her smell of wild pine, crushed berries, and deep mother warmth started to push out Vivienne's expensive, sweet perfumes in his mind. One evening, a loud thunderstorm shook the castle. The stained glass windows rattled. Arthur woke up screaming. His tiny claws came out in fear. Rowena rushed to the crib, but before she could lift him, Cedric was there. The king picked up his son. He held the frantic baby against his wide chest. But Arthur kept thrashing. His cries bounced off the stone walls. Rowena stepped forward. Her mother instincts were stronger than her fear of the big alpha. "He needs to hear your heartbeat, your grace," Rowena said softly. She stepped right into Cedric's personal space. She placed her small warm hand over Cedric's large scarred hand. She pressed it gently against Arthur's back. "Calm your own wolf. He feels your tension." Cedric looked down at her. They were so close he could feel the heat from her skin. He closed his eyes. He forced his breathing to slow. He willed the strong, aggressive feeling of the king to go away. Slowly, Arthur's cries turned into small hiccups. The baby rested his head against Cedric's collarbone. "You have a gift with him," Cedric whispered. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated between them. He opened his eyes. His golden gaze locked onto hers. The look in his eyes was no longer that of a captor. It was a look of deep, unsettling hunger. "You gave him life, and you gave me my legacy." "I gave him life because he is mine," Rowena replied. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was full of steel. "A legacy is just a word men use to fight their wars. He is a boy, my boy." Instead of anger, a flicker of deep respect crossed Cedric's face. Before he could answer, the heavy nursery doors swung open. Luna Vivienne stood in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes burned with crazy anger. Beside her stood Lord Reginald Aster. His face was a mask of rich disgust. "How touching," Vivienne sneered. Her voice shook with held-back anger. "The king playing house with his prisoner, while the kingdom waits for its Luna." Cedric's jaw tightened. He handed the sleeping Arthur to Rowena. It was a silent command for her to step back. Then he turned to face his wife and her father. "You enter my private rooms without asking, Reginald. You forget your place." "I remember my place perfectly, King Cedric," Reginald replied smoothly. But his eyes looked at Rowena with pure disgust. "I am the man who paid for your crown, and I am here to remind you that the Blood Moon Festival is coming. The pack expects to see their queen present the prince to the goddess. If this arrangement continues, the Aster estate will pull its money from the Ironpeak army. We will not be made fools of by a Silverpine stray." Vivienne smiled with triumph. "It is time for the wet nurse to go, Cedric. The boy is strong enough now. He will take cow's milk, or he will starve until he learns to obey." Cedric's wolf snarled just under his skin. His eyes flashed a dangerous gold. "Arthur will be fed by the woman he chooses. If you threaten my son's life again, Vivienne, I will tear the Aster crest from the history books myself. Leave." The threat was absolute. Reginald turned pale. He grabbed his daughter's arm and dragged her from the room. But as the door clicked shut, Rowena knew the truth. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. The Asters would not accept defeat. They would just change their plan. The Blood Moon Festival was the most sacred night in the Lycan calendar. It was a time when the pack gathered under the red sky to honor their ancestors and celebrate new life. The great courtyard of Castle Ironpeak was turned into a sea of big bonfires, roasting meat, and thousands of howling wolves. Inside the royal wing, the tension was crushing. Vivienne had been strangely quiet over the past week. She stayed in the west wing. But Rowena felt a deep, uneasy feeling. The shadows of the castle felt heavier. The air was thick with unspoken evil. On the night of the festival, just hours before the royal presentation, a young maid brought a silver tray into the sunroom. On it was a steaming cup of spiced tea and a plate of roasted meat. "Compliments of Maester Coburn, my lady," the maid said nervously. She avoided Rowena's eyes and hurried out the door. Rowena sat at the table. She was very tired. Arthur was asleep in his crib nearby. She reached for the cup. The sweet, spicy smell of the tea hid any bad smell. She lifted the cup to her lips. Suddenly, a low, deep growl echoed through the room. Rowena froze. She looked around. She expected to see Cedric, but the room was empty. The growl came again, louder this time. She turned toward the crib. Arthur was awake. His tiny hands were gripping the wooden bars. His eyes were glowing an unnatural bright gold. That was the mark of a very strong alpha spirit. He was staring right at the silver cup. His lips were pulled back over his toothless gums. He was growling with a fierceness that did not match his tiny baby body. Rowena's heart slammed against her ribs. Wolf babies were very sensitive to dark magic and poisons. Their survival instincts were sharper than any adult's. She slowly lowered the cup. She took a small silver hairpin from her nightstand. She dipped it into the tea. Within seconds, the silver turned black. It was ruined by a deadly amount of liquid wolfsbane. A cold sweat broke out on her skin. This drink was not meant to make her sick. It was meant to kill her instantly. They would make it look like a sudden heart attack. Before she could even think, the door was kicked open. 2 big guards wearing the Aster crest stepped into the room. Their swords were drawn. Behind them walked Lord Reginald and Vivienne. Too bad, Vivienne sighed. She looked at the untouched cup. I told you the peasant would smell it. You cannot hide poison from a rat. It doesn't matter, Reginald said coldly. He waved to the guards. Kill her. Throw her body from the balcony. We will tell the king she jumped in a fit of madness. Take the child. Rowena backed away. She put her body between the killers and her son. She had no weapon, no pack, no magic. But as the guards came closer, the sleeping wolf inside her woke up. Her eyes changed from brown to a bright, shining silver. Her claws came out, tearing through her silk dress. She was a daughter of the Silverpine, and she would not die on her knees. The first guard lunged, his sword aimed at her chest. The heavy oak doors of the sunroom exploded inward. Wood shattered into 1,000 pieces. A massive black wolf crashed into the room. It was Cedric. He did not bother to change into his human form. The Alpha King was a nightmare of muscle, fur, and pure wild violence. He hit the first guard like a battering ram. His huge jaws snapped shut around the man's throat. A sickening crack echoed through the room. The guard fell dead. The second guard dropped his sword and tried to run. But Cedric swiped his giant paw. He sent the man crashing through the stained glass window. The guard fell to the courtyard far below. Cedric changed back to his human form. He stood naked and covered in blood in the middle of the destroyed room. The air grew so thick with his alpha power that Reginald and Vivienne were forced to their knees. They gasped for breath as the pressure crushed their lungs. You dared, Cedric snarled. His voice shook with a power that made the very foundations of the castle tremble. You brought steel and poison into my son's nursery. She is a witch, Vivienne shrieked. Tears of terror ran down her face. She bewitched you. She bewitched the boy. You are leaving your true mate for a breeding pig. You were never my mate, Cedric roared. He marched toward Vivienne. With a brutal, painful pull of his spiritual energy, Cedric cut the pack bond that tied them together. The invisible rope snapped. Vivienne screamed in pain. She collapsed to the floor. She was officially rejected and sent away from the Ironpeak pack. Cedric turned his killing glare to Lord Reginald. The Aster bloodline is finished. Your lands are taken. Your money belongs to the crown. If you are not out of my land by sunrise, I will put your head on the gate. Reginald scrambled backward. He dragged his weeping, broken daughter out of the room. They left behind a trail of ruined plans. Silence fell over the destroyed nursery. Only the crackle of the fire could be heard. Cedric stood breathing hard. The excitement slowly left his body. He turned to Rowena. She was still standing in front of the crib. Her silver eyes were glowing. Her chest was heaving. She was ready to fight him if she had to. Cedric did not command her. He did not speak as a king. He walked toward her slowly. Then he dropped to one knee in the middle of the broken glass and blood. He bowed his head. He showed his neck. That is the highest sign of surrender in the wolf world. I was a fool, Cedric whispered. His voice was thick with feeling. I treated you like a war prize when the goddess had set me my salvation. You are the mother of my heir. But more than that, you are the only woman who has ever truly taken my heart. I ask for your forgiveness, Rowena of the Silverpine. Rowena looked down at the scary Alpha King. The man who had ordered her pack's death was now kneeling at her feet. She looked at her son, safe and quiet in his crib. The power had completely flipped. My forgiveness cannot be ordered, Cedric, Rowena said softly but firmly. And I will not be a secret. I will not be a mistress hidden in a tower. Cedric looked up. His golden eyes were full of pure love. You will be my queen, the true Luna of Ironpeak, and the Silverpine Pack will be brought back in your name. He stood up. He reached out and gently wiped away the tear that fell down her cheek. That night, under the red glow of the blood moon, King Cedric did not present his son to the pack with Vivienne. He stepped onto the high balcony. He held Arthur in one arm. Rowena stood proudly by his side. The roar of the pack shook the mountains. They were welcoming the true Luna, the captive who had won over a king not with a sword, but with the unbreakable bond of a mother's love. The final battle for the throne was not fought on a bloody battlefield. It was fought in the quiet shadows of a royal nursery. Rowena proved that a mother's bond and a true Luna spirit can break chains, win a kingdom, and bring an alpha king to his knees. After watching this story, think about these questions and ideas. Mothers are important. Rowena did not have money or power, but her love saved Arthur's life. No amount of gold could do what a mother's smell and heartbeat did. You cannot force love. Vivienne tried to force Arthur to love her. It did not work. Love must be real. It cannot be faked or bought. Power does not make you right. Cedric was the most powerful man in the kingdom, but he was wrong to treat Rowena badly. He had to learn to be humble and kneel. Brave people can be small and weak. Rowena was a prisoner. She was hungry and sick, but she was ready to fight 2 guards with her bare hands. That is true courage. Everyone has worth. Rowena was called a mongrel and a peasant beast, but she was the one who saved the prince. Never let anyone tell you that you do not matter. Now, think about your own life. Have you ever seen someone being treated badly because they were different? What did you do? What could you do next time? Thank you so much for watching this story. Please like this video, leave a comment, share it with your friends, and kindly subscribe to the channel. The channel posts new videos like this every day. Thank you, and see you on the next video.